Howdy, folks. Welcome back to the Steampunk Desperado channel. I have finally returned from my 6-week break, and you may have noticed that I was still doing shorts at the time. It's been a lot of fun doing these writing tips. I hope you got something out of them. And I also enjoyed using AI to generate these silly images that I put on these short videos. As far as this show, I got the idea for this show from the Sci-fi subreddit, though I've been too busy to spend much time there lately, unfortunately. Somebody posted about Robert Heinlein's 1961 novel, Stranger in a Strange Land, which led to some pretty interesting discussions. Though I hadn't read the book since the 1970s, I thought that many of them missed the main point of the book. So I got a copy for my monthly Audible subscription and gave it a listen. People have a lot of different impressions of Heinlein. Because of Starship Troopers, a lot of progressives consider him to be a fascist. I noticed that this wasn't the general consensus on Reddit, which is good, because he was a lot more complicated than that. For the time, he was actually pretty liberal. For libertarians, he is a bit of a patron saint because of Moon is a harsh mistress. Even these days, he is controversial. I have encountered essays by conservative Christian writers which lambaste him for his degenerate views on sexuality. Well, I respect their opinions, though I myself don't share them. For me, there's a clear demarcation between Heinlein's work before Stranger in a Strange Land and post-Stranger. Before that, he'd written mostly juveniles and some of the very standard American triumphalist type sci-fi. After Stranger, he got much more into politics, philosophy, and culture, culminating in my favorite, of course, Moon is a Harsh Mistress, in 1966, although he did a fair bit of really good stuff over the 20 and change years after that. Quick recap is in order for those who have never read Stranger in a Strange Land or might not have read it for a long time. Stranger is about a man named Michael Valentine Smith. He is the sole survivor of an ill-fated expedition to Mars. He's a human raised from infancy on Mars by Martians. Now, at the time, the idea of intelligent life on the red planet was not so outlandish. Heinlein's Martians were well conceived in that they are very different than humans, and their appearance is not very well described. It's deliberately vague, and I think the point is it doesn't matter. The Martian race is very long-lived. They have a very slow, long view of time, and they possess psychic powers, including telepathy. They also have some very non-human ideas about ethics and attitudes, priorities, especially in areas such as reproduction and death. The interesting thing is that as they raise Michael as one of their own, he develops the same telepathic and psychic powers as the Martians have. Thus, when a rescue mission returns him to Earth, the authorities don't realize he has those powers. They seem as naive, childlike, and somewhat helpless. In other words, they greatly underestimate him. Jill, who is one of the nurses at the military facility where they're holding him captive, takes pity on him and helps him escape. She takes him to the home of a wealthy friend named Jubal Harshaw. Harshaw is an elderly genius who has both medical and law degrees, but instead he makes his living writing hack fiction. Among his household staff are 4 attractive single young women who serve as his secretaries. And, General Stephen Fetchits. They do not have any physical relationship with Harshaw. They are not a harem, but he does appreciate them as eye candy and has some flirtatious banter with them. This is where the first misconception arrives, which I saw in the Reddit comments, that the book is sexist. I strongly disagree. Women in Heinlein books are not stupid bimbos. They tend to be very intelligent, and they are often scientists and engineers. The difference is that in this book, as in Heinlein's time, there's none of the feminist stigma against men openly expressing their attraction to women, and they're not punished for it. They're not fired from their jobs or sued or anything like that. But back to the story. The semi-world government, which is a federation of the world's democracies, because in this world, communism never went away, so that's a separate block. This federation is hunting Michael because he's the key to their control of the Red Planet. Like the Native Americans, the Martians don't believe in land ownership, so their opinion doesn't matter. But as the only full-time human inhabitant of Mars, Michael is the key to the possession of the planet. In effect, he owns it, the entire planet, due to a legal precedent related to homesteading on the moon. Michael isn't that easy to catch, though, and the longer it takes the authorities to look for him, the longer he has to get acclimated to Earth's environment, its crushing gravity, its thick atmosphere, and to further develop his psychic powers. At the same time, there's a rich and powerful megachurch who wants to get him in their clutches, to control him. An encounter with their strange ceremonies gives Michael the idea of founding his own church, which incorporates the Martian ideals of free love, nonviolence, in most circumstances, and communal property. That must have been a pretty shocking idea back in 1961. The nurse Jill and Harshaw's employees are among the first converts, and that includes the women and some of the men, like the handyman, the security guy, and so forth. And Harshaw himself does not join. He's just baffled by the whole thing. Here's another interesting thing about Stranger. Michael is not the book's true protagonist. It's Harshaw. As a cynical old curmudgeon, he has some pretty funny observations about people and society. I get the idea that Harshaw is a mouthpiece for Heinlein. So to my viewpoint, at 54, Heinlein was not that old. Michael is more of a plot device. He's the fish out of water who reflects the follies and foibles of human society as he slowly learns how things work. Some of the commenters on Reddit seem focused on the sex. Despite the fact that free love is no longer so shocking these days, some people were appalled that only the women in Michael's cult were bisexual. Because his lover Jill warns him that gay men will come on to him, they viewed her as homophobic. Hyman himself, in a later interview, professed no animosity to gays, but at the time, I think that including gay sex in the book probably would have caused it to be banned in some places and to be left out of most libraries and bookstores. So it was a wise commercial decision. The free love thing must have surely stood out in 1961. And when I first read it, probably around 1975, I confess that as a young man, I found the idea very appealing. But what I found far more interesting was the Martian language. Despite being telepaths, they have a spoken language which is very difficult for humans to learn. But when they do, they slowly develop the same powers over time and space that the Martians have. His powers get so elaborately strong, I mean, he can make people disappear at a thought, that you think the authorities have no chance against him. Michael's only weakness is the fact that he wants to please everyone. Martians are very collective in their thinking. Thus, the first time he encounters strong negative emotions from a human, he almost wants to discorporate, that is, to will himself to die, which is another strange power that the Martians have. The concept of language having a lot of power was a common one in the 1960s, and in Stranger, it's a fanciful extension of that idea. And it's a concept called linguistic relativity, or the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. That's the idea that language influences the worldview and thinking of its speakers, and it does so very profoundly. Now, some scholars took it further, saying that language absolutely controls our perceptions. The name Sapir-Whorf comes from the early 20th century anthropologists Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lee Whorf, who was his student. Though neither Sapir nor Whorf actually elaborated the hypothesis, it was other researchers who kind of put the stuff together. The idea is widely disputed now. Like, does it really? I mean, how much does it affect our thinking and our worldview? But it had a very strong influence on science fiction throughout that time, from the 20s through the 60s and 70s. Most famous is the concept of newspeak in George Orwell's 1984, which was written in 1949. Newspeak is an intentionally limited form of English, which supposedly makes it impossible for the proles, that is, the working class, to even think about rebelling against Big Brother. The Martian language is the opposite. It exists not to restrict, but to expand your abilities. Learning the words of this language and of these ancient beings grant the speaker powers over time and space that we can only dream of. I could go on for hours about Sapir-Whorf, so I'll just refer you to a video that I did a few years ago about examples of the Sapir-Whorf idea in science fiction. There are a lot of them, which includes, of course, Stranger in 1984. Links in the description. My point is that this is what really captured my youthful imagination. Imagine that even a tiny portion of this idea were true. Just by thinking the right thoughts, using the right words in your mind, you can be positive, you can open doors that block you, clear away obstacles, and you can go anywhere and do anything. Yet I've come to believe in recent years that linguistic relativity is a profoundly leftist pipe dream, at least for the most part. It's like George Bush Jr.'s aide, Karl Rove, supposedly said, "We're an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality." Well, that's not actually true. The same applies when progressives insist that using a new term will somehow change how things are. For example, if you say healthy at any size often enough, that will negate the serious health risks of obesity. Sadly, it won't. And the examples could go on, and I'm sure you know a lot of them yourself. As I said before, in some very important ways, Robert Heinlein was a liberal, despite his defenses of capitalist society and his adulation of the military. And he was a Navy man, so that's kind of understandable. Did he really believe that there was a shred of truth in the idea that language shapes our reality so completely? Or that it even expand our abilities? Or was it satire? He may have been mocking the notion of linguistic relativity. Or perhaps it was simply a plot device to move the story forward and to show all these other ideas that he wanted to get out. I have no idea which. Which brings me to the third and what I see as the most important message of Stranger in a Strange Land, and that is cultural relativism. Do we Americans have a handle on the best way for people to live? Is good and evil an objective reality which we can determine through logic? Or is it defined by our nature and priorities as a people and a society? And I've come to believe that it's not, because the American way is not necessarily best for everyone. But as we know, both conservatives and liberals tend to espouse this. America has to be a shining beacon to the world, has to tell other people how to live. Well, I think Heinlein would disagree. In this case, Heinlein is squarely on the left, or rather the left as it existed in the 1960s. He was prescient, though only by 6 or 7 years. He predicted the counterculture pretty much as it came to be. Do your own thing was the motto, and that's what the Martians do. The Martians practice free love because they're not male and female like we humans are, so monogamy doesn't really make sense. Besides, all children are raised communally, so they don't have to worry about them. They cannibalize their dead because to let the bodies decay is to waste food, and that's criminal on such a cold and barren world as where they live. They could will themselves to die if doing so benefits the community, and that's the way they think. The community is most important. Furthermore, they know their spirits live on as old ones. Being supremely rational, they would never think of terminating a neighbor for food, as we humans would do if it weren't forbidden and gross, and so on. Our taboos exist because of our weakness. So, Stranger is not just about sex, but also about language and culture. And Heinlein's writing was never the same again. He wrote 19 novels before Stranger and 12 more after. In the process, he made an indelible mark on science fiction. Now, here is one thing that puzzled me, and I'm going to pose this question to you, the viewers. When I first read this book in paper, I remember Michael's cult as being called the Church of the Nine Planets. In this audiobook version, it's called The Church of All Worlds. Now, I suppose that maybe this had been revised since Pluto was demoted in the early 2000s. We only have 8 planets. I checked this with ChatGPT, and it said that no, that 9 planets was an alternate name for the Church of the New Revelation, which is the evil megachurch, and that Michael's was always called the Church of All Worlds because that was more inclusive. I don't really believe this. Please let me know what your impressions were if you remember this from the paper version. I'd like to know. This has been my review and analysis of Robert Heinlein's 1961 novel, Stranger in a Strange Land. Please let me know what you think about it in the comments. Please like and subscribe. Also, check out my work on Amazon. Links, as always, are in the description. Also, stay tuned for more information about my upcoming novel, Hunter's Wager, to be released soon in both ebook and paper formats. For now, this is the Steampunk Desperado saying adios amigos from the Steampunk Desperado channel, where the past meets the future and the present is extraordinary.